Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Centre for Legal Innovation's Reinvent Legal Business series. We're really delighted today to welcome Fiona McLay from McLay Legal. Fiona, as you know, is going to be chatting with us about getting started with LegalTech Projects. I guess this has always been an important topic, but perhaps never more important than where we find ourselves today to be chatting about this. Fiona, thank you so much again for joining us today. Really looking forward to this presentation, and over to you.
Thanks, Terry. Okay, so getting started with legal projects. And these are slightly unusual times that we're facing, but some opportunities around. And what I really wanted to run through, you're all going to be in different size firms, different places, different teams, but just to run through some ideas about things you could do that don't cost a lot or take a lot of work, so using what you've already got lying around. Then we're going to sort of just talk through some of the things that are really good to be keeping an eye on in terms of tech, and then just some strategic approaches so that if you have got some capacity at the moment, some people do, some are just finding themselves strapped, but either way, where you can sort of come at getting started with these legal tech projects so that you are dedicating time to something that's going to be valuable, and so that you're setting yourself, your team, your firm up to be in a better position when we get through this current uncertainty. And so that what you are focusing on with these sort of projects is something that's really going to be adding a lasting value. And I firmly believe that working with tech can really dramatically transform your ability to deliver great work and to delight your clients. So sort of the structure I want to just run through with this webinar is start off by just taking a bit of a look at the state of the legal market. And obviously everything's sort of changed a couple of weeks ago, but I still think that it's good to just see things in a slightly longer context. Then we're just going to sort of look at some of the low-cost tech tools that you might want to try in the short term. Then look at some sort of strategic approaches for what might work in the medium to slightly longer term, and finish up with some practical suggestions of things you can get started on. Some of the stuff I'm going to talk about you may have already heard of, but maybe you haven't really ever had enough time to give it a go. And I want to really encourage you to just revisit that stuff that you've always meant to investigate further. But I really want you to just have a bit of a think as we're going through about, what could I put into place right now? What can I talk to my team about? What could really start to make a difference for me? And if you could leave here with one or two things that you really want to try, that'd be great. And then you'll also have just some ways of thinking about things that you can try in a slightly longer time frame. And so what I'm really talking about, I'm a big believer in incremental innovation. And this came out of, I was working for about 10 years in a small law firm in Sydney. We did just sort of general practice. We did a bit of everything, but we were doing quite complex work. There was very limited resources. We didn't have a team of paralegals at hand. And so it was increasingly trying to juggle that complex work and do it for a price that the clients would accept, and not kill yourself in the process. And I really came to discover the advantages of what I could do by using some of this tech that had dramatically dropped in price, much more accessible, and in a small firm, no tech team, I could use it. And so the way I like to think about innovation is, this quote really resonated with me. It's from a really excellent book that Michelle Di Stefano wrote. But it doesn't have to be huge. You don't have to go off and come up with a great big multi-year project. You don't have to involve, the innovation committee. But what you do want to be doing is something that's going to make a noticeable difference, and you're looking for things that are adding lasting value. And I like to start with this map of the marketing technology landscape, and it's called the MarTech 5000 because there used to be 5,000 of them. There's now 7,000 solutions there. So that's digital solutions for doing marketing. And this is something that's come up in the last 20, 15 years. But when you look at the legal tech map, and this is probably just a a small subset, but still looking at the Stanford Codex, it's got sort of 1,200 solutions. So if you don't need to worry that you've missed the boat on LaWTech or that you're so far behind you'll never be able to catch up. When we look at these two slides, you can see that LaWTech is really still in its infancy. And then the other thing that's really interesting about how LaWTech is being implemented in the legal industry is that when you look at these sort of talk to people about how they're actually finding LaWTech when they implement it, it's not consistently good news. And some of the smaller firms are reporting that, in fact, introducing technology has reduced productivity. And maybe that's because there's a lack of support there. Maybe that's because they're not properly being resourced to really implement that technology successfully. I'm not quite sure. But I just think that we're not seeing fundamentally embracing technology on that implementation level. However, when you look at some of the statistics about where law firms are spending their money, they are. The technology, you can see that the spend on technology is increasing significantly over other areas. And I think that's a trend I think will continue. And then just widening out to the state of the market in Australia, there's significant investment in the areas of RegTech and LawTech to a lesser extent, focusing around legal document automation, but some of the other players there around legal operations and legal marketplaces. And it's always useful to remember too that Australia has a really fractured legal market with a really high number of small and solo firms. There's actually more law firms in Australia than in the UK, and the UK has three times the population. The other thing we're still finding in the LawTech world is that we haven't seen the emergence of one sort of dominant platform, something like the Xero in the accounting world. So I think we'll probably see at some point, a flat platform that will sort of become dominant and people will be adjusting to that, but not quite there yet. So then when we look at some of the statistics that are being bandied around about the future for law and how legal services will be delivered, and there are these sort of scary predictions about percentage that will be done by automation. And you might just want to think, when you think about your future legal practice, what do you see as being sort of the biggest threat? And just turn your mind to whether you think it is, automation or whether it's some other. Because what I have here is some survey results. This was done in the UK, but this is what firms were thinking they were seeing as being the biggest threats. And number one there is other law firms like mine. And I really just want to challenge whether we're thinking widely enough about what's happening, not just in the legal industry, but broadly across the economy. Because when we look at some of these examples of people who have actually brought out LawTech solutions, they're not necessarily law firms. And in the US, it's different because of the structures about who can invest in law firms. But Rocket Legal, not a law firm. And when you just look at that, they were able to serve 20 million people in a year, and they founded that growth because they gave away legal documents for free without requiring a credit card. So some of these people that are entering into the legal services market aren't playing by the same rules that law firms have played by. And it's not just a matter of throwing money at it. We have seen a couple of high-profile LawTech solutions where they just fundamentally didn't manage to get the solution right. And Atrium is one where they ended up going back to really being a legal marketplace. So they sort of pulled a law firm out of the vestiges of what was supposed to be a great LawTech stack solution that ultimately just didn't do well enough in solving a problem. So where is the most promising sort of LawTech future? And I think lies along this line. And this is a picture of what's called a cobot. And so this is being used in a factory in Europe. And what it does is it works alongside a human. It might do the heavy lifting, might spend 24 hours in a spray paint unit. Basically, the work that humans don't want to do, but it can work alongside a human. So you get the benefit of, the human judgment and not having to write software product to encompass 101 different variants. The human can do that, but you just apply the automation or the machinery to the repetitive and heavy aspects. So I think that we should be thinking about, not will a robot take our job, but will a cobot help us do our job? And then when I was talking about coming at this sort of LegalTech projects from a sort of an overall view, these are the sort of basic steps that I want to just run through. And we need to just start thinking. You might have this cycle going for your firm as a whole, but you might also have this sort of cycle going for a particular project. And it starts with you becoming aware there's a need for a change. You develop a strategy for effective change. You prepare how to implement that change. You take the action to make the change and then review and adjust as needed. And that's a continuous cycle. So at any point in time, you may be in different places in that cycle on different projects. I think it's just worthwhile just stopping and thinking, well, actually, where am I in this cycle? If I just finished a project and I'm now having a look at how that works and waiting to see where I need to change it, or am I just been doing exactly what I've been doing for the last 5 years, but I've now become aware that there's some things I could be doing better. So if we start with awareness, I always think it's a great idea to start with just looking at the potential in the stuff that you have lying around. And this is certainly where I started when I was in a small firm with no budget and too much work to get done in the given number of hours I was prepared to spend at work. And also, lawyers, we've been using Word, we've been using Outlook for a long while. It's changed, and the potential that exists in those products is increasing all the time. So it's really worth just checking in again about what you can do with those tools. And I've highlighted in that picture just a couple of things I want to call out. Quick Parts is really a way of saving a block of text, but if there is a particular email or a particular part of a letter that you constantly are sending, you can save that and dump it into any document. You don't need to go and get precedents formatted or to get something rolled out across the firm. You can just do it in your computer or you can roll it out to your team. There's another tool called Quick Steps that sits in Outlook, and what that will enable you to do is save a little automation so that every time you trigger out of an email, you can trigger a set of steps that you want it to do something. You can send an email to someone, you can specify the text you want them to say and where you want that email to be filed afterwards. Just handy for every time you have an invoice, you might want to send it to the accounts team, have them do a specific thing to it and file it away in a particular place. There's also some really good automation that comes in Office 365. There's a couple of tools that exist, but you use Microsoft Word to create a template. You create Microsoft Forms to create the fields that populate the fields in the template. And then you can use an app called Power Automate, which will populate your template from the completed questionnaire. And you can have that form or that questionnaire sitting on your intranet. And you can also use Microsoft Flow to work that into some sort of basic workflows started by emails. And all of this stuff there's some templates to assist you. There's videos to show you how it works. So if you've been thinking that you can't do any automation of Word documents because you have to go out and buy some new piece of software, just have a look at Office 365, and they've got an offer at the moment for COVID-19 where you can get 6 months free. So it's a great way just to sort of maybe just try a couple of documents and set them up and just see what the potential is. This is another innovation in Outlook in Office 365, which I just thought was amazing. And they're just doing some internal analysis on your email box. You don't have to turn this on, but it'll go through and it'll remind you that you promised to get Sally something by Thursday. And here's a little reminder. And it'll also sort of find you some time in your calendar. So these sort of tools are just there, and you just have to start using them. Another thing that I would totally recommend spending a little bit of time on is working out how to use Microsoft Excel. And in particular, being able to present data visually is a really, really critical skill. We're just finding people's attention spans are much shorter than they used to be. And if you can work out how to use a pivot table, if you can find out how to sort of have I used to use it for affidavits, or if I was doing a schedule of particular outcomes in a court case, and you might want to just, change the period of particular time and see what sort of impact that would have. If you can just sort of learn a couple of things in Excel, I think you'll find that it's a massive advantage. And lawyers tend to be scared of it, and I'm just not sure why. It's also really good if you want to find out if you've got duplicates in a list, you can do that. And you can also, project some trends based on data that you've got available. So you might want to get some reporting out of your accounting system. And Excel can do a lot of that sort of dashboard and analysis stuff that you would otherwise be paying for new software to do. It might even be worthwhile getting an Excel expert to set up that dashboard or that reporting for you, rather than you spending several weeks of your life and losing all your hair. But just don't overestimate the amount of functionality that exists in Excel. This is just another example of the sort of doing things differently. And this is an app I have on my phone, and it will do your calculations for you, and it will remember everything, so that if you do make an error in the calculator, you can just go back and pick up the error. Just sort of simple things, but I'm just finding things are much easier than they used to be. Highly recommend exploring voice to text rather than having to wait for dictation to come back, particularly in times when we're working remotely now. And if you used Dragon 10 years ago, you might have been underwhelmed. The quality of the transcription is way, way better than it used to be. The quality of the transcription just in speaking into your laptop using Word is way, way better than it used to be. And also using your phone, both Apple and Android phones have that little microphone button, so you can dictate texts, you can dictate short emails just on your phone. Otter AI is another tool to play around with, and what it can do is it can transcribe a meeting and it will distinguish between two different people speaking. Again, you just want to make sure what the privacy connotations of using a sort of web-based service like that are, but for getting down, really good notes of a meeting with more than one participant, you'll be very impressed by the quality. Well, we all know a lot more about using video to communicate than we did a couple of weeks ago. Loom is a tool that I find really useful for delivering feedback on documents or collaborating on documents with people. And what you can do is, if you want to mark up some changes on a document, you can just record yourself talking through those marked up changes. So if you wanted to explain to someone why you've made these changes, you have it on your screen, you record yourself, and face can appear in a little button visible on the screen, and then you can send them text showing how you worked through the document and the changes you made and give them the context. It's not much better than trying to wait to catch somebody and be able to deliver feedback or an explanation in person. You can use it for staff that you're supervising. You can give it to clients. You can give it if you're trying to do an internal project and you want to explain how you want something to look. It's really worthwhile trying. Lumen 5 is another tool that you can use if you want to turn text into a video presentation for marketing purposes on social media. When I was a litigator, and briefs were a nightmare until I discovered how good it could be if you had the right sort of integrations set up. And Bundle Docs is a document that I was able to get documents straight out of my document management system. I could sort them into an index, I could paginate them, I could make the index run the way I wanted it to run with subheadings. And then I had an electronic bundle that I could share with the barrister or the other side. I could do some pretty fancy sort of adjustment of the pagination, and it would produce an automatic index for me. Really worthwhile if you are trying to handle large volumes of documents. I've also put up there a link to Cronch, which is a great Australian invention, which is really an online chronology to allow you to collaborate in producing a big chronology. You can link to documents. It will do some automatic correction of terms, so you've got consistencies of naming of entries, and it's got version control, and you can allow different people to work on the same document at the same time. So you don't have that problem of a great big Microsoft Word document that's got to 60 pages and people have put the same entry in at different times because they've used different naming conventions. It's a really excellent tool. And eBrief is another tool that has come up out of, I think it's a barrister's clerk in Melbourne, who again just wanted to find a better way for people to get documents to barristers so that they could work on them. This is just sort of a bit of a snapshot of some of those document automation products. I was talking before about the capacity that's sort of generally unexplored in Word and Office 365. If you do have a particular need for some complex document automation, these tools are no code, they're drag and drop. You just turn your existing documents into a questionnaire that people can fill in and will populate a form. Varying degrees of complexity and cost associated with them, but the Centre for Legal Innovation has been featuring a couple of these, so you can see some of the demos. The checkbox demo, they've done a great demo on how to do NDA in, I can't remember, but it was a very short period of time where they were able to automate it. Really worth checking that out just to see if that could be useful for you. But having just told you how good those products are, the next thing I'm going to say to you is just be very careful about putting too much energy into one standalone product, like saying we're going to get checkbox and that will be our innovation strategy. Just because something is a great automation tool doesn't mean that it's going to deliver value or a noticeable difference to you or to your firm. And so you really do just have to think about, right, how's this going to work with what we're trying to do, what our firm's good at, what our clients need, and put that into a bigger context before you sort of fall in love with any particular shiny object. It's also, when you're looking for these things, it's also reasonable to say, look, this one does 70, 80% of my needs. That's good enough. If you keep waiting for 100% satisfaction, you'll be looking forever and you'll never start with anything. But you really just do want to make sure that you've just really thought through how you're going to use this tool, who's going to use it, and where it's going to really deliver something valuable to you, because there's a lot of times where you buy some piece of technology and it ends up just being sort of a bit of a novelty rather than really enabling you to deliver better value. And one way to sort of, before you rush off to get the technology, is just really think through what's the actual problem I'm solving here. And is it just really a problem of resourcing, or is it a problem of process that we could just implement some standard processing and a checklist and that would solve some of the problems? So the other suggestion is not to sort of just say, oh, well, I'll buy a digital solution and that will fix things. You really want to just be making sure that, first of all, you've looked at what you need to do internally to improve your customer service, improve your internal efficiency. And then because what you don't want to do is automate a broken process. But if you've standardised your documents and you've got in place a process that you're pretty happy with, and then that's the time to start automating that process. If you implement a process where you don't have a template document and you have different people in different teams doing the same thing different ways, then trying to digitalise that is just a disaster, where you won't be able to tell the automated system what rules to follow. So this comes back to this preparation. So where do you start? My suggestion is to start with the underused capacity in your practice management system. And everybody always wants to know what's the best practice management system. And I just really think it's the wrong question to ask. What you need to understand is, what am I trying to do? What am I dissatisfied with the current system? What does it not do that I think it should? And does it really not do that? Or is it just that we haven't been trained, or we haven't set it up, or we have to do some more customization to make it do that? And that might be worthwhile talking to other users of the same software, or talking to your IT consultants, because it may be that there is some capacity there that you could unlock. It may be that their reporting isn't very good, but as I said, an Excel spreadsheet could take some of the data that product does produce, and you could get the dashboard of your dreams for a fraction of the cost of going through the disruption of replacing a practice management system. You just really want to have a real hard think about what are you hoping to achieve out of replacing your practice management system before you sort of get stuck in the process of evaluating different ones and having a lot of demos of whiz-bang features. Because if people in your organisation are only using a fraction of the features of your current system, quite likely they're only going to use a fraction of the capacity in any new system you put in too. So just be realistic about how much of a change you're going to be able to achieve just by changing practice management systems. If you are looking to change, and look, there are a lot of good products. I'm not trying to say you shouldn't change practice management systems. There's a lot of good stuff that can be done. What you want to just do is to come up with a good, better and best solution. So, for instance, the good solution might be to improve the existing system by a bit more customization. Then there's a mid-range, and then the top of the line. And so then you can just make sure that you're really getting the right fit for your resources, limitations, and what you want to achieve. And you really also want to not just look at the cost or the cost saving of moving from an on-premise solution to a cloud solution, or whatever the change is. You really need to budget much more than you think for the cost of the implementation and the training and the change management piece that goes around that. Because if you don't invest in that change management piece, like I say, you'll have spent a lot of money on a practice solution that nobody knows how to use, and they spend a lot of time complaining. So if you do want to jump into taking action, it starts with your people. And one of the best ways to work out where there's some real potential to improve your organisation by asking the people, what are the really annoying things? And you also want to really be asking them for what could we do? What's a solution that we could use to fix this problem so that you're not just getting a lot of complaining? And the other thing that can be overlooked in deciding to invest in legal tech is the value of really workshopping this idea. So when you get these suggestions of things to be fixed, just run it around a few people. And I've put up the picture of the Post-it notes because it's a really great way of getting everybody to contribute. If you just sit in a boardroom and the leader starts talking about what they think you should do, there's a sort of tendency for everyone in the room to say, yeah, I think that's a good idea. If you get them all to commit to writing down on a piece of paper that no one else can see and then stick it on the wall, then you're going to get a bit more of a spontaneous sharing of ideas about what people are seeing and what they think could be a particular solution. So it's really worthwhile making sure that you're collaborating effectively. Another way to get some ideas about what could be done is having an Adopt a Dinosaur project program. And that's a photo of Jack Welch, who was the former chief executive of General Election, and he got an employee in his 20s to teach him how to surf the internet back when the internet was new. And after that, he made 500 of his top executives pair up with a junior in the organisation just for the purpose of learning the internet. So it's a thing that organisations do, and it's really beneficial to both parties. The other thing you can do is, if you have got somebody who has got some skills, get them to teach others. It doesn't have to be the leaders always teaching. Look out for some of your digital natives who just are really comfortable with this stuff and get them to demo how it's done. So processes isn't something that not always part of what we learn in law school. This is an example of what a Trello board or a Kanban style of project management, and you come up with a whole lot of different columns of what you're working on today, what's in progress, what you're waiting for on someone else, and what's done. And that's your to-do list, and items get logged out of a backlog into what you're going to do today, and you move those cards along. It's that Trello is a particularly, I like it because it's collaborative. You can assign things to people, they can update the Trello board. And then if you're really sort of running an agile project management, you would have a stand-up meeting every morning to look at where things are at, what's still in progress, are there any backlogs, and maybe reassign some of the tasks among different members of the team so that you're making progress. But yeah, I found that was a really useful way of making progress on a legal tech project inside a law firm where we're needing different people to do different bits, and we could always just keep track of where we were, what was still to come, what we were waiting on, and everybody could update it, didn't have to rely on the leader of the team remembering. There are some other really good tools that you can use when you are trying to do this sort of process analysis. And again, it's a different language for lawyers. It's a visual language, but and this is a particular tool that's called Lucid Charts, but there are a number of other visual mapping tools that you can get, but they enable you to come up with these sort of process maps so that you can agree on just what it takes to get a particular task done in your law firm. And once you map it out and consult with members of the team who are actually doing the process, so you find out how the process is actually done and not how you think it should be done, it really does demonstrate for you where there are areas that could be improved or simplified, or that you've got needless repetition or bottlenecks. another really great place to start is to just have a think about how you're collecting knowledge in your law firm, where professional services is all about sharing knowledge and capitalising on the knowledge of the lawyers in the firm. One suggestion I had is I created a matter in my practice management system, and that was where I just saved documents that I thought could be used again. I just set up some simple folders. Doesn't really matter where you do it. You could do it if you've got Office 365, you can have a team page, or you can have a shared OneDrive or a Google Drive, but have a place where people put things, and don't make it too hard for people where to put things. With improved search technology, it's much, much easier now to do full text searching and come up with the document you need. So in the old days, we used to sort of rely on quite complicated taxonomies. And if you're going to do knowledge management properly, yes, you would do that. But in terms of if you've got nothing and you just want to start somewhere, it's helpful just to have a central place where people store useful documents, and then there's a central place for people to look, and then you can start to build on that. You can see what gets used more often. You can start to do some really good analytics on your document management system and find out what documents are being copied and saved repeatedly, and just try to identify which documents in your firm people are treating as precedents, even if they're not precedents. Then you can do some risk management of that. So I just think it's a really good idea just to start somewhere with capturing knowledge in a systematic way. And what you can also do once you've got your sort of process maps, you've got it started to capture an idea of what sort of functions you might want to automate and make more effective or efficient. You can start to do these swim lane diagrams where you're mapping out all of the different parts of the business that are combined to deliver a particular task or a particular job that has to be done for your clients. And by doing that, you can start to see where there are tasks that perhaps are being done by a more expensive resource that could be moved to a lower value resource. But if you don't do the analysis first, then it's hard to really see those opportunities to make the work be done for the right sort of leverage. And this is another example of a process map where you're mapping your customer's journey and their experience of how the legal services are delivered through the interaction with your firm. And so what you want to be doing is making sure that if you're focusing a lot of effort on improving a process or automating a particular part of that journey, that you're focusing on something that's important to them, or that the customer, particularly a pain point for the customer. There's no point in having, your time recording work brilliantly and be much, much easier, and all your lawyers are much happier if that doesn't deliver any increased customer satisfaction. And look, this is another solution. There's been a lot written about using checklists in medicine, and law is another area where you could, massively affect the number of rejected documents you might have. If you're constantly getting documents that you try to file at court or at the land registry and they're constantly being rejected, that's creating a lot of slowdown and waste of time. Have a think about, well, what can we do just to make check this out and improve these solutions. So when it comes to tech, what I think is really important to remember is just that it's the customer who ultimately decides what tech is valuable and what tech is improving legal service delivery. Just because you think something sounds fun or would be valuable, you really do want to test that against what your clients experience and what their pain points are, and what's going to improve their experience. You want to measure against the way your clients are interacting with other service providers. This is an example where applying for a loan, and by just putting the standard loan application online gave no benefit whatsoever. But by able to cut the number of questions from 144 down to 28, delivered a massive impact. So if that's what your customers are experiencing when they go to a bank and then they come back to a law firm and they can't do anything except coming in to see you and sitting in your law firm and have you manually filling out a form on the computer, is that really the right solution that you're offering? How long are customers going to be satisfied with that level of service delivery? You want to keep an eye on what other competitors are doing, just to see where they're coming up with solutions. Where this was an example where a law firm who was frustrated at her inability to help her clients because the clients hadn't preserved the right records of incidents that happened in the workplace, sat down with a group of clients and said to them, right, how can we help you preserve this evidence? What will work? And they came up with an app that was available to all of them, but it would enable them to give their lawyers better records so they could get an improved outcome if a personal injury claim eventuated out of a workplace incident. And then the final step is monitoring. It's and this is unfortunately a constant process, but after you've gone through all this exercise and you've implemented a change and you've fixed your process, you always want to be looking at it through that lens of, right, what's the customer's experience of this? Could we tweak it? Is there some new improvement that we could roll out? Where are we seeing value here that we could improve? You always want to be asking questions, and unfortunately the LegalTech projects, you'll finish one phase, but there will always be another phase of continual improvement. So we started with that question of, where am I on that cycle? And hopefully it was just sort of got through a couple of ideas of what you might be able to implement right now, but also some other ideas about the sort of things you want to think about before you rush out and buy a nice piece of LegalTech to plug into your particular organisation, and just to think about how you're going to work with your team to implement that effectively and make sure that the way that you're delivering that change is going to make a noticeable difference and it's going to add value to your customer. And so that brings us, I said we were going to sort of look about some really practical ways, and it sort of comes back to you've seen a couple of ideas here, but really start to think about, right, well, what makes sense for you next in the short term and maybe in the medium term, or where should you be looking about getting a bit more awareness about a problem or preparing to actually implement a LegalTech project. And just some questions you might really want to think about in light of that sort of quick armchair review of what are some things that you could start doing today to enable you or your team to work more effectively, or to improve the way you communicate with your clients or your potential clients, or to eliminate an annoying or repetitive manual task. And just if you sort of want to really try to pick one and work through that one and then pick another one. And it can be tempting to say, right, I want to, there's no point just fixing the process of getting a check out the door. But when you look at the impact of maybe just fixing one thing every week or one thing every month, at the end of the year, you're a lot further down than if you had said, no, we're going to just we're going to change our practice management system, but that's got an 18-month lead time and at the end of 12 months, you've just had a whole lot of arguments about which would be the better solution. You haven't actually got anywhere. So I think that incremental innovation has actually, that's why I think it's got such a lot of potential opportunity to really deliver effective value. So one of my suggestions is book some time in your calendar. We're never going to have time to sit around and make progress on tools unless we actually carve it out. And I think I've been sort of showing you that legal state, the state of the legal industry. And I think possibly the enormous disruption that's been sort of thrust upon us by the COVID-19 just shows that there's never a good time to get ready for the future. The future just happens. So it's important to find some time to really think about how you are going to be able to future-proof yourself or your team or your firm, and invest some time in thinking about this strategically and picking some areas of focus that are going to make a noticeable difference, and then setting about with an action plan on how you're going to deliver against that plan. I've spent a bit more time focusing on some of the things I sort of flew through today in this ebook, which I'll get the link to Terry so that you can get it off the CLI website.
I know that a lot of questions also bubble up after these sessions. You know, you start to reflect on it. So, folks, if you would like to make contact with Fiona, you'll definitely find her on LinkedIn, obviously on her website, and we'll make sure that when the recording of this session goes up that we hyperlink to those details as well as the booklet that, thank you, Fiona, has kindly given us permission to hyperlink to as well. And I think you'll really enjoy that, both as a reminder and a prompt for this session, but also just a great read in and of itself. So thanks again for that, Fiona. Just a quick mention again, as we said at the beginning, this is being recorded, so the session and obviously your ability to revisit it with colleagues, or for those that missed it, they will be able to see it for the first time, first of many, I think, Fiona. I think they're going to look at it a lot. That'll be available to you, we hope, by the end of this week. Fiona mentioned the Reinvent Legal Business series, of which this is part. Just a quick reminder that you'll find a load of webinars and podcasts on a whole bunch of different areas that you can also go back and revisit on our CLI Collaborate Click free resource hub. So do avail yourself of that opportunity. We'd be delighted if you did. Later this week, on the 8th of May, Ian Mountford from Fit for Social will be doing a webinar on social media do's and don'ts, a practical guide to building your brand online. So I'm sure that one is going to prove, or has already actually proved, to be very popular as well. Thank you again, Fiona. Thank you, everyone who attended. Really a delight to always have you here. We look forward to welcoming you back. If you want to follow the work that we're doing of the Centre, please connect with us on LinkedIn, on Twitter, on Facebook, in a whole bunch of different places. We'd be delighted to see you there as well. So for now and until next time, thanks very much and bye.